Welcome to this explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's topic. We're going to be diving into a 2,000-year-old story, a really defining moment that happened right on the dusty shores of the Sea of Galilee, involving some incredibly ordinary fishermen. But as we'll see, this is definitely not just some dusty ancient history lesson. The text we're unpacking today serves as a really profound, striking blueprint for our own modern spiritual transformation.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want to ask you something. What would make you drop everything right now? Seriously, I want you to truly imagine it for a second. Walking away from all your current security, stepping completely out of your comfortable little bubble, leaving your daily routine, your 401k, maybe even your smartphone behind, all for this total unknown, higher calling. I know, it sounds absolutely impossible to our modern sensibilities, right? Like, no way. But that is exactly the scenario presented in the text we are exploring today. Section 1, the personal invitation. The whole text frames this around the phrase, follow me. So let's paint the picture here based on Matthew chapter 4. Imagine a totally mundane workday. Jesus approaches two brothers right in the middle of their daily grind. They are literally actively casting their nets into the sea to make a living, and he gives them this incredibly simple invitation. Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of people. Now, what our source text highlights so beautifully is what Jesus does not do here. He doesn't start by calling them to join some massive, complex religious system, and he doesn't demand they memorize a giant theology rulebook. No, it's an offer for a personal relationship. The core invitation is just so direct and so intimate. Section 2, the power of immediately, responding without delay. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is, well, hearing an invitation is one thing, right? But the text points out that they immediately left their nets, responding without delay, without negotiation, and without waiting for better timing. The absolute obedience required to answer the call in this way is what makes this narrative so uniquely challenging. Because, let's be real, compared to our typical human nature, this level of obedience is frankly shocking. Our natural human instinct is almost always to hesitate. We want to weigh the pros and cons, check our Google calendars, or maybe ask for a few days to think it over. But the narrative here shows zero negotiation. Which brings us right to our own lives and our modern delays. We've all said things like, oh, I'll do it later. Maybe when life gets a little easier. Or when I feel completely ready. Come on, be honest with yourself right now. Which of these modern excuses do you catch yourself using? The source notes that so many times people feel a pull, a call to spiritual growth, but we just brush it off with one of these exact phrases. We use these delays to avoid dropping our own nets, perpetually waiting for a perfect time that, let's face it, never actually arrives. Section 3, dropping your modern nets, leaving security. The text notes that for Peter, Andrew, and eventually James and John, who literally left their boat and their father behind, answering this call meant walking away from literal physical nets. They were walking away from their deepest sources of security, their established family identities, and their entire financial livelihoods. So let's map that ancient story directly onto our 21st century lives. Our modern nets are our comfort zones, our toxic habits, and oh man, the illusion of absolute control. We love feeling like we're holding the steering wheel of our lives, don't we? The physical nets of the biblical story map perfectly onto the psychological baggage and the false security that we desperately cling to today. We are absolutely tangled in our own modern nets. So the crucial point the text is making here is that following Jesus really means letting go of anything that competes with him in priority. The narrative suggests that abandoning our modern nets isn't just about giving up a couple of bad habits here and there. It fundamentally represents surrendering control over our own lives. It means taking whatever attitude, whatever habit, or whatever priority that currently sits on the throne of your daily life and willingly leaving it right there on the shore. Section 4, a brand new purpose, embracing a spiritual mission. Now let's shift from the heavy cost of what they left behind to the incredible value of what is gained. The text describes how Jesus takes their natural occupation, ordinary fishermen catching fish just to survive, and completely flips it into a spiritual mission. They become these empowered disciple makers tasked with changing human lives forever. The story illustrates how completely ordinary lives and just natural day-to-day occupations are transformed into profound eternal purposes. The source text suggests he meets them exactly where they are, using the language they already understand, basically saying, I will make you fishers of people. Section 5, the ultimate transformation, changing history. Because they were willing to drop their nets immediately, the source text points out the ultimate trajectory of their lives. These simple, uneducated fishermen eventually became the foundational leaders of the early church. They preached boldly, they suffered for their faith, and they quite literally altered the course of human history. And this brilliantly illustrates the core message of our explainer today. The text argues that following Christ is not just about leaving something behind, it is about becoming someone entirely new. According to the narrative, true discipleship fundamentally changes your identity from the inside out. When they're called, they aren't just relocated or handed a new set of rules, they are completely transformed. Let's move to and see how this builds into what we can view as a complete transformation arc. It's essentially a hero's journey, traced from those shores of Galilee all the way to global spiritual impact. Step 1, hear the call, that personal, simple invitation. Step 2, drop the nets, the immediate obedience and letting go of all those modern excuses we talked about earlier. Step 3, gain new purpose, shifting from mere survival to a grand spiritual mission. And finally, step 4, transform history. The source implies this exact same progression applies to anyone willing to take that first step. Which brings us to our final thought based on today's text. Are you still holding on to your nets? The source material leaves its readers with this really powerful reminder that the invitation actually hasn't changed. The text challenges us to ask, how are we responding to our own spiritual calls right now? Are you delaying? Are you making excuses? Or are you ready to recognize your modern nets, drop them on the shore, and embrace a totally new path today? Take some time to really think about what your modern nets are. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it brought you some clarity, maybe a little inspiration, and I'll catch you next time.